Marjorie Taylor Greene got kicked to the proverbial curb by the Freedom Caucus. Why, would you ask? Well, apparently it stems from a Mean Girls moment on the House floor just a few weeks ago. You may remember that's when Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert could be seen there bickering over their competing articles of impeachment. And at some point in the heated conversation, MTG had a few choice words for the Congresswoman from Colorado's 3rd District. She called her a little bee, which I won't say here at 11 in the morning. Now the Freedom Caucus has told Marjorie Taylor Greene that she can't sit at their table anymore. And Congressman Andy Harris actually confirmed to reporters this week that they had voted to revoke her membership before the July 4th break. He told Politico, "I think the straw that broke the camel's back was publicly saying things about another member in terms that no one should." That was the straw that broke the camel's back. The number of times we've had to censor what these members of Congress say on cable TV is probably one too many.
Yeah,
right?
there also was almost a fist fight on the House floor at the beginning of the Speaker's race. So, this is just par for the course these days. But listen, yes, there was this heated confrontation between Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene has been trashing some of her fellow members of the Freedom Caucus. But really what the cardinal sin was for Marjorie Taylor Greene was that she has become an ally of leadership. And in the eyes of the Freedom Caucus, that's against their founding mission, right? They were this group that became an antagonistic thorn in the side of leadership. They derived their strength in numbers. And to have Marjorie Taylor Greene out there, sidling up to Kevin McCarthy, breaking with them on a number of things, that was the last straw for them. But the Freedom Caucus is really struggling right now with their identity and what do they stand for? Are they going to be about Trump? Are they going to be about fiscal spending issues? Are they going to try to play the inside game to get what they want, or do they still want to be the outsiders?
So what I hear you saying that it wasn't calling someone the B word, and it also
wasn't her long history of racist, controversial remarks.
Let's play some of the controversies.
The so-called plane that crashed into the Pentagon. It's odd, there's never any evidence shown for a plane in the Pentagon.
I really want to go talk to these ladies and ask them what they are thinking and why they're serving in our American government. They really should go back to the Middle East.
It's a crime punishable by death, is what treason is. Nancy Pelosi is guilty of treason.
But it's being proposed by some of you. Look.
So not all of that, but getting close with leadership.
Yeah, I think it's not just the fact that she got close with leadership. It's that she was publicly, criticizing other House Freedom Caucus members for not supporting leadership positions, not just not supporting the leadership, but she criticized them for not supporting the debt deal. And I think some of them just privately started to feel a way that they felt she was playing both sides, both claiming them as a member of the House Freedom Caucus, but then publicly distancing themselves from them in ways that I think they felt that she was kind of stepping on their backs to cozy up to leadership and to further her own personal aspirations. And I think that was kind of what they felt that was no longer tenable. And I also think they kind of felt like they couldn't trust her.
Yeah.
To invite her into the room with them, but then feel like she's also meeting what she says weekly with Speaker McCarthy.
Yeah, and then saying publicly things like this about the debt limit negotiations, which was really a core fight for the Freedom Caucus. Listen.
I'm angry. I have to deal with the debt ceiling issue. But again, to me, it's like the shiny object. It's not connected with the budget. The budget and appropriations is the real fight. I'm willing to negotiate and get something and get it over with so that we can do the real work and cut spending.
To be honest, that sounds actually perfectly reasonable.
Right.
But for the Freedom Caucus, she was basically saying to them, stop fighting over this thing that actually is really their sort of reason for being in many ways.
For sure. I mean, she is, she's kind of matured as a member of Congress, I guess, in terms of being more pragmatic, which the Freedom Caucus obviously doesn't like. But she has one supporter overall, and that's Donald Trump. I mean, so I think she's probably less concerned about what, random members of the Freedom Caucus say. Her profile has grown incredibly. And, she is close to the speaker, and she's gotten a lot from that.
But, this is also reflective of just the new politics in the Republican Party since Trump came along, right? The petty infighting, the backstabbing, or the front stabbing. This is why Speaker McCarthy's job is so impossible, right? You have an ally, you're like, oh, a valuable ally on the right, and then it blows up in your face because her colleagues in the Freedom Caucus find her allyship with McCarthy to be problematic. I mean, it's just so complicated. But you know, you look at this and the sort of proxy wars that play out in the House related to the presidential politics, who's in charge of the Republican Party. She's got Trump as an ally. Well, after we talked about this on Friday, Donald Trump Jr. is out there saying he's going to go help Lauren Boebert fundraise in Colorado. She's got a really difficult re-election race. Yeah. She's one of these seats that, you know, isn't supposed to be competitive, but because of how she is as a politician, it's going to be again. That her opponent is running against her again. He's raising a ton of money, and so where's her fundraising going to come from if McCarthy's not as invested in her? If you know you lose people on one side, you got to find them elsewhere. It's such a minefield on the Republican side, the inter-party politics.
I just wanted to mention back to Marjorie Taylor Greene, we can't discount how politics and personality and ego also plays a part. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not the only House Freedom Caucus member to support Kevin McCarthy. She's not the only House Freedom Caucus member to support the debt ceiling deal. There were only 8, but there were 8, but she's the one who's getting kicked out. So it's more than just the policies. It's also, again, the personality, the conflicts. And again, I think they felt that they didn't like the way she was treating them publicly and wanted to send a message.
So you raise an interesting point about how deep this really goes. And Ralph Norman made this point to Politico, suggesting that this may not be the end of the story. He says, the speaker's race, there was some difference in opinion. The debt ceiling, there were differences of opinion. We had to get 80% on any major issue that we had to take positions on some big issues. We have not been able to get there. The House Freedom Caucus, to your point, Melanie, is struggling to figure out what do they really stand for? And can they be united enough to even matter in some of these debates?
Yeah, their strength comes from strength in numbers and voting as a block on whatever the issue is that they decide, right? I will say, in such a slim margin, it only takes like 5 or so members to be able to hold things up. But for Kevin McCarthy, I'm sure he is sitting here this weekend looking at the growing divide in the Freedom Caucus and saying, this is actually helpful to me. If these guys can't unify around a single ask in these negotiations, in these demands, it weakens their negotiating hand and strengthens his.
But how far does this really go? I mean, if they can't get to 80%, I mean, that's a lot of members that they're going to have to take some looks at, or maybe they're hoping that they scare them enough with what happened with Marjorie Taylor Greene that those folks say, okay, let's get in line.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it was they were trying to send a message with this vote. Marjorie Taylor Greene became the face of it, but there are certainly, to Tia's point, other members who have not been falling in line, who have been cozying up to leadership. Jim Jordan is a perfect example. He's been walking a real tightrope of, you know, being in the allies of Kevin McCarthy, but also still, you know, playing to his conservative base. He's the head of the Judiciary Committee. But these tensions are definitely growing.
And it's just been interesting to watch going back to when we were negotiating over the debt ceiling and the spending package. You know, initially, these guys let McCarthy get this bill on the floor. They let him pass the bill, shock the White House, and it put him at the negotiating table, put Republicans in a stronger position. All these recriminations, the infighting, seems to have happened after the whole negotiations were figured out and the debt ceiling was lifted. And the recriminations are still going after the fact. But in the moment, they really weren't sure how to play it, and they just sort of held their fire. And they did strengthen McCarthy in that position.
In some ways, it seems like they weren't really aware of what was really happening in that negotiating room because they read the bill like the rest of us did and realized a lot of the things that they thought they got were, in my favorite phrase, rainbows and butterflies. Not all that real here in Washington sometimes. But coming up next, 2's a party and 3's a crowd. That's what many Democrats are shouting from the rooftops, hoping that one particular group will take the hint. That's coming up.